Right now, in 2026, there is a catamaran ferry that crosses open water at 67 miles per hour while carrying more than 1,000 passengers, 150 cars, and a duty-free shop the size of a supermarket. That is not a typo. That is not a concept render. That ship has been in service for over a decade. It holds a Guinness World Record, and it is only number one on this list because of a technicality that most people have never heard of. Because here is the part nobody tells you. The ship sitting at number 2 once recorded a speed even higher, a speed that has never been beaten by any car ferry in history, and yet it will never take the crown. By the end of this video, you will know exactly why, and you will also see the brand new 2026 machine that is quietly preparing to make every single ship on this list look old-fashioned, not by burning more fuel, but by burning none at all. These are the 10 fastest catamaran ferries in the world in 2026, counted down from fast to absolutely absurd. And every speed you are about to hear is real, verified, and documented. Stay with me, because the gap between number 10 and number 1 is bigger than you think, and the story of how we got here involves jet engines borrowed from fighter aircraft. A shipyard in Tasmania that refuses to stop breaking records, and one crossing in South America that turned into a full-blown arms race on the water. Let us set the stage for 30 seconds, because to appreciate these machines, you need to understand one thing about water. Water hates speed. It is roughly 800 times denser than air, and the energy needed to push a hole through it grows brutally as you accelerate. Double your speed and your fuel consumption does not double, it explodes. That is why a normal ferry plods along at 18 or 20 knots and nobody complains. The catamaran changed that equation. Instead of shoving one fat hole through the sea, you split the weight across 2 razor-thin holes, slash the wetted surface, and suddenly the water has far less to grab onto. Add lightweight marine-grade aluminium, add water jets instead of propellers, and in a few extreme cases, add actual gas turbines, and you get ships that move at highway speeds while people sip coffee on board. One more thing before we start counting. Speed at sea is measured in knots, and 1 knot is just under 2 kilometers per hour, or about 1.15 miles per hour. Keep that in your head, because when I tell you the number 1 ship exceeds 58 knots, I want you to feel what that actually means. Number 10, Fjord FSTR. We open in the cold, rough water between Denmark and Norway on the Hirtshals to Kristiansand route, one of the most exposed fast ferry crossings in Europe. This is where Fjord Line operates. Fjord FSTR, a 110-meter catamaran built by Ostal in 2021, capable of a top speed of 37 knots, while swallowing 1,200 passengers and 410 vehicles. Think about that combination for a second. That is roughly 68 kilometers per hour in the North Sea approaches, with a small town's worth of people and a full parking garage on board. The reason this ship makes the list is not raw pace. It is pace with payload in genuinely hostile water. Ostal's Auto Express catamarans use hull-mounted motion control systems, essentially computer-controlled fins that read the waves hundreds of times per second and cancel out pitch and roll before passengers feel it. The result is a crossing that used to be a queasy ordeal on conventional ships, turned into a smooth 2-and-a-bit-hour hop, and here is your first taste of the theme running through this whole countdown. 9 of the 10 ships you are about to see came from just 2 builders, Ostal in Western Australia and Incat in Tasmania. 2 companies on the same island continent, locked in a decades-long rivalry that has pushed ferry speeds to places nobody thought commercially sane. Remember that rivalry, because at number 3 it produces one of the most ridiculous machines ever put to sea. Number 9. Express 5. Stay in Denmark, but head east to the Baltic, where Molslinjen's Bornholmslinjen service connects Ystad in Sweden with Ron on the island of Bornholm. The ship on this run is Express 5, and it is a monster. At 115 meters, it is the largest ferry by volume ever constructed by any Ostal shipyard in the company's entire history, delivered from their Philippines yard in 2023. On sea trials, it hit a top speed of 40 knots, and in daily service, it cruises at 37, carrying up to 1,610 passengers and 450 cars across 2 full vehicle decks. 4 Wärtsilä 31 engines drive 4 water jets, and that engine is not a random choice. The Wärtsilä 31 is recognized by Guinness World Records as the most efficient 4-stroke diesel engine on the planet, which matters enormously when your fuel bill scales with the cube of your speed. Inside, this thing feels less like a boat and more like a business class terminal. Leather reclining seats with charging ports, a full bistro, a children's play area. But the detail I love most is the economics, because it explains why these giant catamarans exist at all. A conventional RoPax ferry of similar capacity might need a crew of 60 or more. These fast cats run with a fraction of that. They turn around in port in minutes because vehicles drive through rather than reversing out, and they can complete twice the daily rotations of a slow ship. Speed, it turns out, is not a luxury. Speed is a business model. And the company that owns this ship believes in that model so completely that it has just placed a bet on the future that we will get to near the end of this video, a bet that sounds physically impossible. Number 8, Eleanor Roosevelt and Margarita Salas. Now we go to Spain, because number 8 is really 2 sister ships, and together they represent something that had never been done before. When Balearia launched Eleanor Roosevelt in 2021, she became the world's first very large catamaran RoPax ferry powered by dual-fuel reciprocating engines, meaning she runs primarily on liquefied natural gas. At 123 meters long, she was, at entry into service, the longest fast ferry ever built, with room for 1,200 passengers and 450 vehicles, a service speed of 35 knots, and a maximum over 40. Then in 2024 came her sister Margarita Salas. Same 123-meter platform, but with 10% more power from 4 dual-fuel engines producing 9,600 kilowatts each, an extra passenger deck, and an outdoor aft terrace, with a bar cruising at 35 knots between Barcelona, Mallorca, and Menorca. These ships were designed by Incat Crowther and built by Astilleros Armon in Gijon, and they can burn 100% biomethane or blends of up to 25% green hydrogen without touching the engines. Why does that matter on a list about speed? Because liquefied natural gas burns cleaner, but historically meant heavy tanks and compromised performance, and Balearia proved you could go 40 knots anyway. Eleanor Roosevelt alone cut thousands of tons of carbon dioxide per year compared to the ship she replaced. Hold that thought about clean fuel and speed coexisting, because the tension between those two things is about to become the defining story of 2026. And there is a 130-meter ship currently strapped to the deck of a semi-submersible transport vessel crossing an ocean right now. That takes the idea to its absolute extreme. I will show you that ship in a few minutes. Number 7, the Cotai water jets of Macau. Time to leave Europe entirely, because pure speed is not a Western monopoly. In the Pearl River Delta, the crossing between Hong Kong and Macau is one of the busiest fast ferry corridors on Earth. And the Cotai waterjet catamarans that serve the casino traffic typically top out around 42 knots, moving roughly 400 passengers per sailing. That is about 78 kilometers per hour in some of the most congested waters in Asia, dodging container ships, fishing boats, and hundreds of other ferries day and night, in monsoon, season, and out of it. These Austal-built cats exist for one simple reason. A gambler in Hong Kong wants to be at a baccarat table in Macau in under an hour, and an airline cannot compete with a terminal in the middle of the city. The frequency is relentless, sailings departing like buses, and the operational tempo means these holes rack up more high-speed miles per year than almost anything else afloat. It is easy to forget when we obsess over record numbers that the real miracle is repetition, hitting more than 40 knots several times a day, every day, for years without drama. But if you want to see what happens when an operator demands that kind of reliability on a route famous for punishing weather, you need to fly 10,000 kilometers west to a chain of volcanic islands in the Atlantic where 2 shipping dynasties have been at war for decades. Number 6, Volcán de Tagoro and Volcán de Taidia. Welcome to the Canary Islands, home of the most intense fast ferry rivalry on the planet. On one side, Fred Olsen Express. On the other, Naviera Armas. The prize is the sea bridge between the two capital islands, Las Palmas de Gran Canaria and Santa Cruz de Tenerife. And in 2019, Armas escalated hard by taking delivery of Volcan de Tagoro, a 111-meter in-cat wave-piercing catamaran costing 74 million euros. Service speed 35 knots, but maximum speed 42.4 knots from four-man diesel engines producing 9,100 kilowatts each, pushing almost 1,200 passengers, over 200 cars, and nearly 600 lane meters of freight. The route is one of the most exposed in the archipelago. Open Atlantic swell hitting the channel between the islands, and the ship shrugged it off so convincingly that Armas went straight back to Tasmania and ordered a sister. Volcan de Taidia arrived in 2021, and during her speed trials, she recorded over 42 knots while carrying 600 tons of deadweight. Let me repeat that, because it is the detail people miss. Not 42 knots empty and polished for a press release. 42 knots loaded with the equivalent of hundreds of cars. There is a lovely story attached to this ship too. She is named after a submarine volcano that erupted off El Hierro in 2011. And on her delivery voyage from Australia, the crew deliberately sailed her directly over that underwater volcano as a tribute to her own name. Now, the sharp-eyed among you will know. Fred Olsen answered with two 118-meter Austral trimarans that trialed at over 44 knots. And they are magnificent, but they have 3 hulls. And this is a catamaran list, so they wait politely outside. The twin hull crown in the Canaries belongs to Armas, and from here on, every ship on this list can exceed 45 knots. We are done with the merely fast. Everything from this point forward is in the realm of the slightly unhinged. Before we hit the top 5, one quick interruption, because 2026 demands it. While every ship so far burns something, diesel or gas, there is a vessel completing its delivery right now that burns nothing. InCat's hull 096, christened China Zorilla, is a 130-meter catamaran built for Buchabis, and she is the largest fully electric ship ever constructed. In fact, the largest battery electric vehicle of any kind in human history, $200 million. More than 250 tons of batteries, storing over 40 megawatt hours of energy, roughly 4 times larger than any battery installation ever put on a ship before. 8 electric water jets, capacity for 2,100 passengers and around 225 cars, plus a 2,300 square meter duty-free deck, the largest shopping space on any ferry in the world. In January 2026, she ran her first sea trials on the River Derwent in Tasmania and hit 29 knots, carrying 600 tons of cargo on batteries alone. Her service speed will be 25 knots. So no, she does not crack this top 10. But here is the twist that tells you where this industry is going. Her delivery to South America was delayed because the heavy lift ship meant to carry her got stuck in the Persian Gulf during the Strait of Hormuz crisis, and a replacement vessel, the semi-submersible Black Marlin, had to be dispatched. A ship so valuable that geopolitics rerouted around it. And if you think 25 knots is where electric tops out, wait until you hear what her builder is doing next, because that reveal is coming right before number 1. For now, back to the countdown and back to raw, fossil-fueled violence. Number 5, world champion jet. The Greek islands, the Cyclades, summer 2026. Out of Piraeus comes a ship whose name is not marketing exaggeration. It is a literal job description. World champion jet, flagship of sea jets, can reach up to 50 knots, carrying 1,280 passengers and 140 vehicles. Sprinting from Athens to Mykonos in under 3 hours while conventional ferries take 4 or 5, but her legend was written a quarter century ago under a different name. She was built by Ostel in the year 2000 as Willem Clausen for the Danish Bornholm service, and on her delivery voyage from Australia, she did something no commercial passenger vessel had ever done. In a single 24-hour period, she covered 1,063 nautical miles, averaging over 44 knots for an entire day and night. A world record for distance traveled by a passenger vessel in 24 hours, touching a top speed of 47.7 knots along the way. Picture that. A car ferry holding motorway speed for 24 consecutive hours across open ocean. Gas turbine power made it possible, and when Sea Jets bought her in 2017 and rebuilt her for the Aegean, they inherited a ship that still embarrasses vessels 20 years younger. In 2019, the shipping journal Lloyd's List named her Ship of the Year. Today, she threads between Syros, Tinos, Mykonos, Paros, Naxos, and Santorini like a commuter train that happens to do 90 kilometers per hour on water. And yet, in the top 5 of this list, 50 knots only earns you 5th place. Let that sink in while we get smaller, much smaller, and somehow even faster. Number 4, Patricia Olivia II. Everything so far has been huge. Number 4 is the assassin of this list, a compact 45-meter passenger catamaran built in 1998 by Director Shipyards in the United States for the Bucebus fleet in South America. No car deck, no freight, just around 400 passengers and a set of engines that have no business being that angry. On sea trials, Patricia Olivia II achieved 52 knots at full displacement, which made her the fastest passenger-only catamaran in the world. Full displacement means fully loaded, not a stripped-out publicity run. 52 knots is 96 kilometers per hour. On a boat, you could park inside some of the other ships on this list. She was built for the River Plate, the enormous muddy estuary separating Argentina and Uruguay, and she is your introduction to the most speed-obsessed stretch of water on Earth. Because here's what you need to understand about the River Plate. On one shore sits Buenos Aires, on the other, Montevideo and Colonia, and millions of people want to cross every year. The distance is too short for airlines to dominate and too long for slow ferries to feel acceptable. So one company, Bucebus, decided the answer was to simply buy the fastest ships human beings could construct, over and over again for 30 years straight. The final 3 ships on this list all belong to that one obsession. 3 ships, 1 river, and a company run by a man who kept phoning shipyards and asking one question: can you make it faster? Number 3, Juan Patricio. Delivered by Incat Tasmania in the mid-1990s, Juan Patricio is a roughly 70-meter catamaran designed for that same River Plate crossing, and her top speed is 53.8 knots. That is very nearly 100 kilometers per hour. From a ship built when the internet was still making dial-up noises. For years, she stood as the fastest vessel Incat had ever produced, and the truly absurd part is her longevity. Because this 1990s speed machine remained in commercial service for decades, carrying around 450 passengers and dozens of cars across the estuary at speeds that modern navies would respect. Incat's chairman, Robert Clifford, built his company's entire reputation on this kind of madness. His wave-piercing catamarans won the Hales Trophy, the Blue Riband, for the fastest commercial Atlantic crossing 3 consecutive times, and one of his hulls once averaged more than 41 knots across a 3-day unrefueled Atlantic voyage. Incat has built 25 high-speed craft over 5,000 gross tons capable of exceeding 45 knots. No other shipyard on Earth has numbers like that. Juan Patricio at 53.8 knots was the family's crown jewel, the fastest of the fast, and Clifford was reportedly satisfied. Bucebus was not. Which brings us to a phone call that produced the single fastest car ferry speed ever recorded, and to the strangest twist in this entire countdown, because the next ship, number 2, is faster than number 1. And I am going to explain exactly how that makes sense. Number 2, Luciano Federico L. In 1997, the Spanish shipyard Bazan, today known as Navantia, delivered to Bucebus a 77-meter catamaran designed by AMD Marine Consulting of Sydney with a whole, refined through tank testing in both China and Spain specifically to swallow enormous water jets. She carried 450 passengers and 52 cars, drew just over 2 meters of water, and she was, at delivery, one of the most expensive fast ferries ever constructed. Her name was Luciano Federico L., and during sea trials, she recorded a top speed of 60.3 knots. 60.3. That is 111.7 kilometers per hour, 69.4 miles per hour, and it earned her the Guinness World Record for the fastest car ferry ever, a record that still stands in 2026. Her service speed, the pace she was designed to hold routinely with passengers aboard, was 56 knots. Gas turbine screaming, hull barely kissing the estuary, Buenos Aires to Montevideo compressed into a blur. So if she holds the highest speed ever recorded, why is she number 2? Because that 60.3 was a trial figure achieved during testing, and the ship that beat her sits at number 1 for a different, harder reason. Anyone can build a sprinter. Trial speeds are records set on the clock, light-tuned, perfect conditions. The true crown in this sport goes to the fastest ship in actual commercial service, the fastest vessel you or I can walk onto with a ticket today in 2026. Luciano Federico L. is the fastest catamaran ferry ever timed. Number 1 is the fastest one, still doing it every single week at a scale she could never touch. And the machine that took the throne did not just beat her on service, it beat her while carrying more than double her passengers, 3 times her cars, and a shopping mall. Number 1, Francisco. Hobart, Tasmania, June 2013. INCAT hull 069 goes out for lightship trials on the Derwent, ballast removed, both gas turbines lit and running on liquefied natural gas. The GPS log comes back reading 58.1 knots. That is 107.6 kilometers per hour, 67 miles per hour, achieved by a 99-meter ship, displacing thousands of tons, and INCAT noted she was still carrying full gas tanks plus 35 tons of marine distillate at the time, meaning even that number was not her true ceiling. Robert Clifford predicted she would go faster still in the shallow waters of the River Plate. Guinness World Records certified her as the fastest ferry in the world, and 13 years later, in 2026, nothing in commercial service has taken the title away. Her name is Francisco, after Pope Francis, the first Argentine Pope, and she is the ultimate expression of the Bucebus obsession. Her power comes from 2 General Electric LM 2500 gas turbines, the same engine family that powers frigates, destroyers, and airliners, each producing around 59,000 horsepower for a combined output in the region of 118,000 horsepower. Those turbines feed 2 enormous Wärtsilä axial water jets, and each of those jets expels 24,000 liters of water every second. 2 swimming pools thrown backwards per second. She was also the first fast ferry in the world powered by liquefied natural gas, which means the fastest ferry ever put into service is simultaneously one of the cleaner burning ones, a sentence that should not make sense, and yet here we are. And she is not some stripped racing hull. Francisco carries 1,024 passengers and 150 cars, with a first-class lounge, a bar, and a duty-free shop covering 1,100 square meters, sprinting the 140-mile crossing between Buenos Aires and Montevideo in a couple of hours. People compare her to a jumbo jet that floats, and the comparison is fair. She has the turbines of an aircraft, the capacity of several aircraft, and a cruising speed that would get you a ticket on most residential streets. That is your king, 13 years on the throne and counting. So there's your 10. From Fjord FSTR at 37 knots in the North Sea to Francisco at 58.1, a spread that covers Denmark, Spain, Macau, the Canary Islands, Greece, and South America, built almost entirely by 2 rival yards from Australia. But I promised you one more thing at the start of this video, and it is time to pay it off. Because the most important speed story of 2026 is not any ship currently on this list, it is what happens to this list next. Remember Molslingen, the Danish operator from number 9? In 2025, they went to INCAT and ordered not one, but eventually 3 129-meter catamarans for the Kattegat routes between Aarhus, Ebeltoft, and Aden. Arriving from 2027 through 2029, each one carries around 1,500 passengers and 500 cars. Each one has a service speed of 40 knots. And each one is fully battery electric. Almost 45 megawatt hours of batteries per ship, zero fuel, zero exhaust, recharged in port in about 30 minutes from 58 megawatt shore chargers, then back out across the strait at 40 knots as if physics had signed a waiver. The first hull was rolled out of the shed in Hobart in July 2026. And once in service, these will be the largest electric ferries in Europe and the fastest large electric ships anywhere. Think about what that means. 40 knots would place a battery-powered ship level with Express 5 on this very countdown ahead of the gas-powered giants without burning a single drop of anything. Every ship in today's top 5 achieves its speed by setting extraordinary amounts of fuel on fire. The next generation is coming for those numbers with electrons, and the same Tasmanian shed that built the current record holder is building them. So the real question for the next few years is not whether the electric catamarans can climb this ranking. It is how long Francisco's 13-year reign has left, and whether the ship that finally dethrones the fastest ferry in the world will do it in total silence. If you want to be here when that happens, you know what to do. I will see you on the water.